Hey guys, okay, so we're talking about how social media has changed behavior, and I had a research article that talked about how social media has greatly altered behavior in consumerism. Basically, it talked about how marketing managers have had to completely alter the way that they function because they aren't really in control anymore of content and timing and frequency of information that's being processed because consumers can communicate with each other and specifically report on how they feel with the product, if they're satisfied, if they're dissatisfied. So a couple points that my research article made that I'm going to cover are consumerism in how marketing managers have changed and how consumers react and how that involves social media obviously and the behavior they engage in. So a couple of the points was that now they're turning away from obviously radio, television, magazine, and newspapers and are more in demand of media consumption. This behavior has led them to change their purchasing decisions. So social media is perceived by consumers as more a trustworthy source of information regarding products and services. They obviously turn to social media to find out is a product good? If you think about it, a lot of the times we check out products on the internet before we buy them, or if they're going to be good, if they're not, if they're worth it to buy or not, we always turn to social media. So basically it was pretty cool how blogs and other social media tools are being used to alter behavior. One of the examples that my research article talked about was how Toyota enables its customers to provide feedback on a broad range of issues on this blog called Open Road Blog. And it can give helpful suggestions, give feedback on certain brands of certain cars of the Toyota brand, and allows and encourages open and honest communication between the consumers. Also, a couple more points it talked about was how the internet is becoming a huge source of consumer information. It's number one in consumers at work and number two for consumers at home. So that was basically my research article. For the example of technology, it was really cool. I found these technologies that talked about how it's increasing transparency in governments around the world. So ICTs, which are information and communication technologies, and how they're cost effective and convenient. And basically what they did was increase transparency in governments, which was awesome because we talked a lot about how governments are effective depending on transparency in our cluster in the first 2 quarters. I'm just going to go over a couple of examples of how countries directly use social media to increase transparency. First of all, the blog talked about India. They put rural property records online to decrease bribing because it increases speed at which the records can be accessed and updated. In Pakistan, the tax system is being altered because of reducing direct contact between citizens and tax officials to reduce bribery. Philippines Department of Budget and Management made an e-procurement system of government to allow bidding on government contracts to prevent price fixing and allow public accountability. And then in our very own country, the U.S. has created sites that allow access to the data of government expenditures for stimulus dollars, general funds, and information technology funds, which are intended to promote public monitoring of government spending or faster identification and elimination of projects that are wasteful and pointless basically. So yeah, that was my example of the technology and how it's pretty awesome. It's basically helping increase transparency. And I think both my research article and the technology tie into how social media has really increased people getting more involved, people getting more the consumers, not just the people who used to be in control, such as the government and the marketing people. Now it's the people can now, because of social media, can give their feedback. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. And then my research article was on behavioral technologies and basically just studying how they work. They basically apply them to possible problems of psychological environments and see how it goes. And then so basically what it did was it considered power and how it influences people. It looked into different situations where it kind of changed or adjusted people's behavior or beliefs or opinions or something like that, and basically to adjust how they feel about power and the power they have. And a really cool thing it talked about was the metamorphic model of power, which is really cool. It involves two aspects, basically of consequences of people who had received powers or a change of opinion of power from these behavioral technologies. And so the two aspects, one was that people gained a significant amount of confidence and just kind of like personally like felt better about themselves. And number two was it went so far as it made them have the perception of other people being inferior to them. They got a sense of superiority over everyone else. Oftentimes, to an extent, that was a little bit too far, but it was really cool to see how that was came into play, just basically through shifting people's behavior and through these behavioral technologies. So, and then they also looked at basically the perceived and actual effectiveness of changing their behavior. And then once the people had received the power, again, they looked at the consequences of receiving power. Another consequence of the power was a rejection of kind of like a democratic style of control. People just felt that they were basically like in control of their own destiny with too much power. So it was really cool how they went into detail about that, of how people change when they do receive the power, or at least have a feeling of power. And then they also looked into like possible ways to avoid problems with power, such as ethical safeguards and just like any urgent need for examining situations in which people might abuse their sense of power. So after adjusting people's power ideals with these behavioral technologies, it was really cool that they basically used this to and then they could apply it to the bigger picture, which is using behavioral technologies to solve practical problems of learning, of also things like therapy, marketing, and like even as things like as basic as parenting. They use these behavioral technologies to adjust people's behaviors or opinions and see how to properly react to certain behaviors. And it was really cool to get a deeper look into the sense of power. So that is what my research article was on, and that is it. All right, goodbye.